elaborate website system where you have multiple pages and so forth. So for now, we're not doing that, but that's why. Just wanted you to know why he's separating the files that way. So basically, this formatting information you see here gets applied back over in our HTML file, sort of behind the scenes, by pulling that file in here with this line of code. Okay, and you can see our opening and closing tags. We've got a header section, and the header section contains the title of the web page, which is what you see at the top of your browser. So you notice I've got Google Maps API basic example, and if I look up here in my browser at the top, you see the name Google Maps API basic example. Okay, now this is not really that HTML file, but just wanted to point out that that's where that appears. Okay, and then we've got a body section, and in the body we include this div tag, which is very important because this is basically setting up the window that's going to contain your map. Okay, and he's named it, the ID equals map. We could have called it something else besides map, but it just made sense, I guess, for him to call it map. So but it's important to note that you have to have that div tag in your HTML file, and we'll see why a little bit later. We'll see this again later. And then he closes the body, and then he closes the HTML file. So that's that HTML file. Again, it's basically setting up your title, your headers, it's setting up your standards, and then it's pulling in the files that it needs to complete the page. And the reason it doesn't open when we drag it into our browser is because it's not added the JavaScript file yet. So the JavaScript file will come next. And so again, the approach he's using is he's building on each of these examples as the chapter moves forward. So let's go ahead and open our next HTML file. And for now, I'm just going to drag it and drop it in there again. It's going to open a third window. And then that way we can compare back and forth. So basically in this next HTML file, it's listing 02_3. If you look through the content, you'll see it's mostly the same as the previous one, except it adds our JavaScript in. But just notice that it still is using that same CSS file that we had in the first HTML file. So it's still using listing 0202, which was this file up here. So just note that. And then what he's done is he's added a script tag. And this script, I'm trying to highlight the code here for you. The script file is really important because, or the script tag is really important because what it does is it goes out and gets the JavaScript file that it needs to add into the code. And it also loads this reference to Google Maps. And this is where we get into the API information. I'm trying to highlight it for you here. And so we've got a reference to the http maps.google.com, and then we have information pertaining to the version of the API that we're using. Okay, it notes we're using the API, and we're using version 2.124. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, Google is now into version 3, but it still recognizes version 2. Now, it's been doing this for a year or two, or maybe even 3 almost now. And so they are pretty soon going to quit recognizing version 2. And so you have to update this to version 3. Now, we're going to stick with version 2 for now because, for one thing, it still works. And for another, I'm not sure if we go to version 3, we may lose some of our tags and stuff. They may have done away with some of the tags that version 2 used, and we would need to know the new names and so forth. And that information's not in the book, so I don't want to make it any more confusing than it has to be. But we could change that to version 3 and run it and see if it worked. And if it worked, we'd know it was okay. But but there may be a tag somewhere along the way that doesn't. So we'll just keep it at version 2 for now. And then the all-important key here. Okay, we've got the key equals, and then this really long number. And he points out in the book what the key is, and he even points out how to obtain a key. Well, there's some things that have changed now. The key is still relevant, but you don't get the key the way he shows in the book any longer. What Google used to do is basically they required you to have a separate key for every server that you were using to host your maps on. And that was their way of tracking an individual server and how many hits that it was getting and so forth. And what they've went to now is really like a universal key. So you get assigned a key as a user of Google. And since all of us by now have Google accounts, we all have the ability to get a key still for free. And there's some limitations on it. I think you can get up to like 25,000 hits per day or something like that before you have to start paying for it. So it's got some limitations, but nothing that's going to interfere with us. But the problem is you get the key a little bit differently than what he describes in the book. So I'm going to have a separate video on showing you how to get that key. And for now, I just wanted to point out where the key is put in the file and what it does. And so for now, don't try to get a key yet, because the nice thing is you can run all of this code from your hard drive without even having a key. So as long as we're running it from our own computer rather than hosting it up on a server, we can leave this key field blank even, and it will still run. So for now, just don't worry about the key and just kind of ignore the references to most of the references anyway to it in the book for the moment. And we're going to run our code off of the hard drive for now, and then a little bit later on I will get you started on a site of your own, and then we'll need to make sure we get a key. So, but that's what that's about there. And then we've got this line here that's referencing another file, which is our JavaScript file. And if you note the name of it here, it is listing02_06.js. Okay. And in the book, he will walk you through. If you look up here in the listings, you'll notice we've got a 0204.js, an 05.js, and then an 06.js. And this version of HTML we have here is referencing the latest version. And that's why when I pulled the file over into my browser, everything loaded up like it does at the end of the chapter. So as you read through the book, he will put a little bit of code into the 04 JavaScript, and then build on it with 05, and then finally ends up with the 06, which is the complete JavaScript. So, so this makes more sense when you're reading the book, and you'll see basically he's building that file as he goes so that he can not overwhelm you with everything all at once. So just kind of read through the book and before you do a lot with this, and it will make a lot more sense. So for now, again, we're still in the HTML file, and now we've got basically a completed HTML file that goes out and pulls our CSS file in. In this case, it's using a key, but again, you don't have to have the key for it to run. And then it pulls in the JavaScript file. And he's added a couple other lines here at the end that basically refers to when the map loads, it's refreshing the screen and so forth. And just ignore that for now. He talks about it a little bit in the book. And then we still have the div here. Okay. And so like I did earlier, I can go up here and I can select that file and I can drag it in my browser window and drop it, and it will open up correctly. And I'm going to go ahead and maximize this window now so that you can kind of see what it looks like. And sort of center that point a little bit, because that's the way it would be if the window had been full window. And then you can click on that, and you've got Hello World in there. And let's take a look at where some of this is coming from now. Of course, the area we're in is around Denver, Colorado, you can see. And notice up here at the top, we've got 4 different tabs. It's defaulting to what they call the terrain view. We can switch over to our regular map view, which is like what you would get if you just went to Google Maps and went to this area. By default, you would get this. Or we can switch over to our satellite view. Or we can do a hybrid view, which will pull in some of the text or some of the roads and labels and stuff off of the map window onto our satellite view. We have a little overview map down here in the corner, We can drag it around to recenter it if we want to move, larger distances, or we can just move shorter distances by just panning the map around. So you can basically do a lot of the things you do when you're in a regular Google Maps session. The big difference being is this is open up from code that we created ourselves. Of course, we didn't create the Google Maps, but we created all of the, the info window here and put the marker on the map. And with our code, we instructed Google Maps which features to load. Again, the overview window, the different types of map types, and they call them controls. So we did the map type control. And then over here, you'll see we've got the zoom control and a pan control. Now, one of the differences you'll notice, and this is probably a version 2 thing versus version 3, is if you try to scroll with your mouse, if you've got a little wheel on your mouse, it doesn't work. It doesn't see that for scrolling. You basically have to use the scroll control over here, or the zoom control, I'm sorry, to zoom in. So that's one difference, and it's a little aggravating because we're used to using the little wheel. But again, this is very likely because this is a version 2 of the API instead of version 3. But you can click anywhere on this zoom control and zoom in larger increments as well. So it's not that big of a deal for now. So let's take a look at some of the code that's behind this. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my minimize view, and notice it remembers that I had the window up in the little corner there, so I don't have to pan it around and recenter it or anything. So it's kind of nice once you set up a view like this, it will remember that. So let's close some of these windows in Notepad first. So we've looked at the CSS file, and there's only one because it's using it throughout all of the examples. And we want to use the most recent HTML file because that's the last one that was used in the chapter. So let's drag it back down there and put it in. Let's put our CSS file in there. And then let's go ahead and I'm going to jump to the end and use the last JavaScript file. And again, you can read in the book about through the iterations where he explains each step. So I've got the 3 different files, and these 3 files are all needed basically to make this map that we have up here. Okay, I'm going to drag my HTML in there one more time so it recenters everything and sets it back to the default, and I can click on it and do the hello world thing. So let's take a look at this. Now again, we've looked at the HTML already, and you can see that it's basically giving it a title and it's pulling in the files that it needs. But just so you can see that you do have control over what's going to appear in this map up here, let's make just a couple little minor changes like we did in chapter 1. So where it says Google Maps API basic example, I'm just going to change this to Mark's Google Maps. Take out the API and just say basic example. And I'm going to save that file. And now again, we've got the same thing as we did in the previous chapter. I could just click save, but it would overwrite that original file. Now I've got a backup of the original, but I might want to go back to it without having to go and pull it out of the archive. I'm just this once. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rename this. I'm going to save it as, and save it, put my initials in front, or put my, just say my in front of it. Don't have to be your initials, just you can just say my listing. Now I'm not going to put any spaces in it here because you'll notice he uses underscores a lot, and when you're working on the internet you can put a space, but it sometimes gets browsers confused. Usually they will fill in that space in the code by putting a %20 %20 in the code, but I'm going to just put the my in front of it without putting any spaces. So we've got my listing 0203. So let's save that, and you'll see that it adds it to the file over here. And I'm going to now drag this over into the browser window and open it up. And everything looks the same. We click on our little info window. It looks the same there, but if you notice at the top up here, you see the title. It changed. It says Mark's Google Maps basic example, just like we changed it in there. So that little change that we made down here is reflecting in our file. So I just wanted you to see that you do have the control here that you can change and edit what he has for you, and it will appear up here. Likewise, if you had a different listing, like say you had customized your CSS for some reason, and you renamed it, like and this is a little extreme, but I just wanted to make the point here. If I copy this CSS file, I want to paste it back in my same window here, and Windows adds the word copy when you do that, so that keeps it from overriding the existing file. I'm just going to change that, and I want to put it to instead of 02, I'm just going to call it 03 CSS, just so it's a different name, okay? And then if I can, excuse me, I can change this 02 here to an 03 in my code. Okay, you have to be very careful that you only change, what you've changed in the file name. Just make sure it matches, and then I'm going to save that again. Now I can just save because I've already saved it as my listing, and it will not overwrite the first listing we started with. And then I can just drag that in there again, and it's not going to look any different because we didn't really make any changes. I just wanted you to see how it still opens correctly, even though we changed the name of the CSS file, and that's because we had created that CSS file out here. So if we edit that CSS file, I don't know if let's see if there's any changes we could make in it. I'm going to drag it in here and look at it. What it looks like what it's doing is it's telling it to use the full height of the window. It's basically using 100% of your window the way he has it set up. And he points out in the text that if you were putting it on an actual web page, you would want to make that a smaller number so that it didn't take up all of your web page. So just for an example, let's just change that to let's just change our width and the height down here to 50% instead of 100. And we'll make sure we change both of them, or else it will be distorted if we don't. And then let's just save that code. And then since our browser window already has the latest HTML file in it, I can drag it and drop it in there again, or I can just refresh it. So if I refresh this, we should get a new window, and it will probably look different size-wise. Now I'm going to maximize it first so that you can see what we had. This is what we had before we refresh, and then we'll refresh, and you can see that it's basically, it looks like a fourth of the window, but we lowered the numbers by half, which made it a fourth of the window. This would be handy if we had some other information on our website over here on the side, for example, and we could put the map and have our regular type web page in there. This is just a quick and dirty example. I don't have anything to show over there right now, but just mainly wanting you to see how you can make changes in the code, and then it will reflect in your final result. You just have to be very careful to make sure that you change the names both in the actual file and in the references in the code to it. So we reduced it by 50%, and that's what we got. So let me set that back like we had it, and again, remember, all we changed was this number here, and that was just the reference in that CSS. I'm going to go back to the HTML, and now it gets a little confusing when you start having all these windows open, but I'm leaving them open for now just so that I can switch back and forth to them pretty easily. And so again, I could change that 03 that I created back to 2 and save it, and it's using this original CSS file. And if I refresh my window again, when I do that, it's going to fill the window back up like it was, because we're pulling from our previous CSS file now. So you can see that it's by setting your windows up this way, you can tweak all of this information real easily and see your results real quickly. Just be real careful that you make your references, you change the names and so forth to match what you're actually editing. So back to the JavaScript. Let's go back to our JavaScript file. And I want to maximize this window for a minute. And here is all of the code for the chapter 2 that he ends up with. Again, he builds this through different iterations. But this is the final JavaScript file he created. And let's go through it a little bit here. It sets up a variable named map, okay? And map is and I'm going to bounce back and forth from the windows so that you can kind of see the examples. And map, if we went back to our HTML file, map, this is the map that's referenced right here, okay, in the div tag. So the div tag sets up an ID equals map, and that's what we're seeing referenced here as a variable, okay. If we change this name map here and don't change it back in our HTML file, then the file won't open. Nothing will happen. So those have to match. Okay, then he creates a function. Okay, and this function is basically going to do some stuff here, and you'll see that really he's just got one function in this JavaScript file. In a really long one, you might have multiple functions. Okay, and we will add multiple functions to this in the future chapters. But it's basically pretty simple right now. It's basically a load map function. Okay, and and then he sets some code here that basically checks to make sure your browser, the browser that the user is using to view this with, it needs to be compatible with Google Maps. And nearly all browsers are now, so it's not really an issue. But if it was a browser that didn't, then the user would get this message here that he's created. Okay, and so it checks for that. If the browser works and it's fine, then it goes on to this part of the code. And here he introduces a new object called GMap2. Okay, and the GMap2 is really important because it's basically an object that has a lot of different procedures that can go along with it. Okay, and in this case, what he's got it doing is it's creating this new GMap2, and it's setting up your map types here first of all. And you can see that we've got 4 different map types, and when you read through the book, you'll see why you have to specify each one. You could let it default on its own, and what it would do is it does not add the terrain map by the default. And here the terrain map is what we call a physical map. Okay, that's what the version 2 of the Google API refers to it as. So he wanted to have it basically to where it opened up with the terrain map by default. So he had to declare the 4 different types of maps, and then when he specified the coordinates, okay, and the coordinates he puts into a variable, which again the book shows that if you read real carefully through the book, you'll see why he's doing it that way. And the coordinates get entered as a center point, and then we've got a zoom level of 10, and then our default map type is the physical map, which is that terrain map. Okay. Then he creates the info. He creates a marker first, and he puts that marker right on the coordinates, and then he ties to that marker an info window, which is where he puts the hello world. Okay, and then that marker gets added as an overlay to the map, and that's what this line of code is doing here. Then these last 4 lines are basically the controls that we talked about. One of them is dealing with the scale control, which is your which I believe is the scale bar. Okay, got a little scale bar in the lower left if you didn't notice it. And then we've got an overview map. Okay, we looked at that. And then we've got the type control, which is where is referencing back up for these 4 different types of maps. Okay, and then we've got what they call the large map control, which is the zoom and the pan features. Okay, so we've got the the different controls added into this. And that's basically what the JavaScript does. Now, just for fun, like we did before, let's just change it a little bit so that we can see that and see that we can actually have some control over that. So instead of hello world here, I'm going to change that to welcome to the Denver area. And I'm going to save this, and just again, so I don't overwrite the original, I'm going to put my in front of it. So I'll save it, and I'll add my listing 0206, and again, don't put any spaces there. We'll save that. Now let's put our windows back like we had them. And again, I could just refresh, but I'm going to drag and drop this time. And we want to use we could use either one, the one that I created a little while ago, but I'm going to go ahead and use the one he created last as an example here. We'll run that over. It looks the same initially. We're back to the original name up here at the top. We click on the little marker though, you'll see that well, it's actually showing hello world still. Hang on. So if we run it the way we did here and just drag and drop it, we still have hello world in here. We don't have the text that we changed. And think about why that's the case. Well, we changed the name of the JavaScript file, right? So we have to remember to go back into our HTML file, which references that, and change the name in there as well. So what I'm going to do is, instead of changing that original file, I'm going to go ahead and close that one and pull in the one that I created a little while ago, which is basically the same thing, with the only thing we changed was we added our name to the title up there. But now, instead of pulling in the JavaScript that it references, I'm going to pull in the one that we just created, which was the my listing 0206. And then we'll save that. And now we run that again, except we'll pull in the HTML file that we had created. And then, so we see our name at the top up here in the title. And if we click on this code now, we see welcome to the Denver area. So it's pulling in the JavaScript file that we edited. So again, you have to be real careful to make sure that you reference the new files that you created when you're doing this. And again, remember, we changed the CSS just as an example to reduce it to half, but the full looks a lot better. But just to show you again that you can real quickly switch back and forth, I could change that name back to the one we created, save it, just refresh my window up here, and it's going to show the map at that half size again, which again, this is not something you would want to keep, but I just wanted you to see how you have control over the different files that you're using. And you can see that it still shows welcome to the Denver area because we're pulling in the correct JavaScript that we edited. But of course, you know, we didn't change the overview map. Looks larger here and everything's kind of distorted. So so what we'll do is we'll switch it back here back to the 02 CSS file, save it, go up here and refresh our browser window, and we're back to where we were. So hopefully that doesn't confuse it too much, going through it this way. Read the book real carefully through the chapter, and hopefully when you combine this overview that I've given you with what's in the chapter, that will help everything to make more sense and not confuse it more. So give it a try, practice with it a little bit. See if you go ahead and make some changes on your own, change the title around, do just some basic edits, change the name from the hello world to something else for that message. Just keep it fairly simple, but just enough to get comfortable with doing what I've done here. That would be a really good start. And in chapter 3, which we'll work in next week, it really builds on this a lot more. So we start getting into a real interesting example using Arches National Park, and we start adding a lot more stuff to our info windows and things like that. So it really picks up from here and goes on into that. I will work up how to get a Google API 2 video here sometime before too long, but you can go ahead and work off your hard drive in the meantime. So everything should be fine for now. And in a way, you're better off to work off your hard drive right now anyway, because you want to be a little more comfortable with this before you start putting it online. But we will eventually get to where we can put this online, and I'll show you how to set up a little quick website of your own. And I think you'll really enjoy that. So go ahead and practice with this again. Practice setting up your windows in a way that works for you. This is just one way you could do it, but it seems kind of handy to me. And maybe get that Notepad++ if you like, and and practice with just dragging and dropping the files around and until you get comfortable with it. You can get too comfortable with some of this, and sometimes you'll get a little mistake that you didn't catch. You forget to change a line of code, change a name like we did a little while ago as an example, or something like that could happen, and you'll get to where you have to logically think these things through when you're working with this stuff, and that's part of the learning curve, and we all go through it, and I'm still going through it myself because I don't use this enough to be so comfortable with it that I'm not making those kinds of mistakes neither. So we all do it. So just give it a try and practice with it. And I think the more you do this, the more comfortable you'll get with it. And give it a try, and maybe send me a link sometime before the end of the week or early next week or something. Just send me a link in the email or something about it, an example that you created. And maybe zip up your three files, your HTML, your CSS, and your JavaScript file, and just zip those up. And maybe I'll put a Dropbox. I'll just go ahead and put a Dropbox on the site for that. So just give that a try. It's not. I'm not going to put a deadline on it right now. You just go ahead and send that when you get it ready. But give it a try and send me a zip file with those three files so I can kind of see what you did. And yeah, again, it doesn't have to be anything elaborate right now. You can keep it pretty simple. I mainly want you to get comfortable with the logic of opening these files and understanding about the references from your HTML file and that kind of thing. So enjoy it, have fun with it, and we'll see you next time.